Alright. So, I don't know about you, but as a single person, anytime I'm meeting somebody new and it's introduction time, there's just a little bit of awkwardness. Okay? Right? So it's like, hey, what's your name? Steve. Hey, I'm Mark. Tell me what you do. I'm a pastor. Okay, if we can get past that awkwardness, right? Then I'm like, oh, are you married? Tell me about your family. No, I'm single. Oh. And sometimes there's a tone, and sometimes there's not, right? And you get that little bit of a feeling inside, like you're maybe a little embarrassed or a little apologetic. You feel like you have something you have to kind of explain or justify yourself. Is it just me? I hope not. Sometimes you feel like somebody turned a spotlight on in your face. Right? And so in my experience, people are usually kind of a little puzzled. Now, they never say this out loud, but you can tell they're kind of working it out in their heads. They're like, is he divorced? Is he gay? Is he weird? And then, don't we all have like well-meaning married friends? We're like, well, why don't you find somebody nice and settle down? Right? That is a trick question, by the way. There is no good answer to that question. And I think that anybody who asks it ought to be fined. Anyway. So here's the other factor. I'm 48. I'm single. I've never been married. And I like it. I'm actually quite content. Not looking for a relationship. Even so, like, is that okay? Am I allowed to be happy this way? Do I like have permission? But then I know a lot of people, a lot of my friends who are single, and they don't really want to be single, or they don't like being single, or they wish they weren't single. Here are some of them. I have a friend, competent professional man in his late 20s. He thought he would be married by now, and he's not. And he just feels a little uneasy about it. I know two bright, young, professional women starting promising careers in their 20s, and they have never dated anyone. So, I know them pretty well. What's wrong with them? Well, as far as I can tell, nothing. Nothing is wrong. Another friend, he was in a long-term relationship with a woman. They had a kid together, but then she didn't want to get married. She cheated on him and left, took him to court of custody, and took all his money. And so he's freshly in kind of a single zone. I have another friend who's around my age. This guy's amazing. Godly, intelligent, professionally competent, socially adept, and physically fit. He's single, but he kind of doesn't want to be and isn't really sure what to do. And sometimes when you're asked about your relationship status, underneath is this whole complicated web of circumstances that require some explanation. Sometimes you tried and failed. Sometimes it feels like you haven't had any opportunity. Sometimes you were betrayed and got scared. Sometimes you don't know what to do. You want to give up. And the feeling begins to kind of crowd in on you a little bit. And you start telling that these little scripts start firing off in your head. I'm not good enough. I should be better. This will never happen for me. And you start to get that subtle fear kind of happening in your head. All right. Now, I know that's sort of a strong open. I apologize for that. And the other thing I want to say is at these teaching nights, it's not our intent to always talk about singleness. Like, so I'm a single person. I don't want people talking about my singleness all the time. Not interested. But I've felt this, and I've had enough conversations with single friends of mine who felt this at different levels. And so I really wanted to address it. I've been a single Christian for 30 years. I've been a single pastor for 23, and I've never taught on singleness before. This is my maiden voyage. So what may surprise you is to learn that Jesus knew about this little feeling too. And tonight I want us to look at one story where Jesus, single man, has a conversation with a single woman and see how he helped her move from this sense of isolation and disconnection into community and purpose and mission. All right, ready to go? If you have a Bible or want to follow along on your phone, you can go to John chapter 4, but I think we have all of this on the screen, so you can just watch it up there. And I'm going to read the whole thing, and then we'll kind of walk through the text together, and I want to just make some observations. And then at the end, I want to give an opportunity for us to kind of dialogue about it. So if you're going along and I say something, you're like, well, that's wrong, well, then you can tell me at the end. And hopefully we'll have a little interaction, and that'll make it better. All right. So John chapter 4, this is Jesus and the woman at the well in Samaria. Let's start at verse 4. And he, that's Jesus, had to pass through Samaria. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock." Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, so I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come here." The woman answered him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you're a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth." The woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." Just then his disciples came back. They marveled that he was talking with a woman, but no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why are you talking with her?" So the woman left her water jar and went away to a town and said to the people, "Come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ?" They went out of the town and were coming to him. Let's skip down to verse 39. And here's the result. Many Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. "He told me all that I ever did." So when the Samaritans came to him, they asked him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. And many more believed because of his word. They said to the woman, "It is no longer because of what you said that we believe, for we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this is indeed the Savior of the world." Okay. All right. So there's a ton in that passage, and we're not going to even attempt to address it all. It's very rich. But I want to draw out some observations. I really just have 4 about the interaction between them and some of the dynamics about their singleness. Okay. So a woman's single. She's had 5 husbands. So is she like Elizabeth Taylor? Marry, divorce, marry, divorce, marry, divorce. And the answer is maybe, but probably not. I did a little research on this, and we don't really know for sure, but in all likelihood, some of her husbands had died on her. It was actually fairly common because women married around 14, 15, and men married around 30 or so. And mortality was worse. They had a lot of disease, that kind of thing. Is that often women would have to go through 2 or 3 husbands in their lifetime. Because the other cultural piece is that women in that culture had to be attached to a man, either a husband or a male relative of some kind, in order to be under their protection. That's just you had to have that if you're a woman in that time. And so, like, if the woman went through a couple husbands and didn't have a son whose house that she could stay in, she would have to continue to find her way along to other men. And probably what happened was she had to either become like the second wife or the concubine of somebody in that village in order to stay protected. But then she found herself in this situation where she was not religiously approved. It wasn't like a religiously approved kind of marriage. And it's possible that there could have been some adultery. Some commentators think that she might have been a hooker, and then others disagree or whatever. So it's a kind of checkered past, but the general picture that I get is she's single is not entirely her fault, right? But the thing that we learn about her is that she's lost respect in that culture. And the sign that we get of that is that she's coming out to draw water in the middle of the day. Okay? So women always came either at the beginning of the day or the end of the day when it was cooler, and they all came together to draw water, and they did that for protection. But here's this woman coming out by herself in the middle of the day. And probably what has happened is that she's avoiding contact with the other women of the town, among whom she was once a respected equal, but now, because of what's happened to her and how her life has unfolded and her status in that culture, she has reason to kind of be ashamed or embarrassed of what's happened to her. Probably what happened is she wound up having to be, concubine of this final guy, and went out with the other women as usual, and they sort of gave the looks that women sometimes can give. and then one day one morning she might have gotten up and said, well, I'm not going out there right now. I'm just not going to deal with it. And so she went out there at noon, and probably felt a little better. She probably didn't mind the heat. And then the next day she did the same thing, and the next day she did the same thing. So there she is. She sort of drifted into this isolation and disconnection, trying not to be reminded of her pain. Now, I'm reading a little bit into this, but I don't think I'm reading that much. So you can push back on that when we talk about it. All right. So this feeling of unworthiness in light of social expectations, the term for it is shame. I've been reading some on this in the last couple months. Some of you are familiar with Brene Brown. She's been a shame researcher. I've read some of her stuff. I recently read a great little book by Kurt Thompson called The Soul of Shame. And so I've been learning a lot about this dynamic. Here are a few things that I picked up from my reading. First thing is that when people feel these feelings of shame, they tend to hide and isolate themselves, right? So kind of like Adam and Eve after they sin, God comes walking in the garden in the cool of the day. What do? They hide from him. People who feel shame withdraw from relationships where they might feel vulnerable or exposed. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing is that shame is fundamentally emotional. Right? The thing that I learned about it is that as we're developing as little kids, we develop the capacity to feel shame before we can form sentences, right? Before we can use language. And that's why sometimes for some people feelings of shame are really, really deeply seated, and they defy our attempts to kind of reason our way out of it. Okay. Third point, shame is felt internally, but it arises interpersonally. Shame is felt under the interpersonal gaze of other people, right? So like the reason that I only feel that little twinge of embarrassment about singleness is when other people ask me and I'm introducing myself, because it's sort of socially imposed, right? Even in the garden, when God's talking to Adam and Eve about their hiding the shame, right? They feel that they're naked, and so they shame. And God's first thing is, who told you that? Right? So shame arises socially. Okay? Then the fourth thing is that the strategy that shame employs is to protect us, right? Protect the wounded places in our soul from exposure by hiding them. And so that's what it's trying to do. And that's basically where this woman was. Now, Jesus happened to be completely sympathetic with this woman because he was also single in a culture that really, really valued marriage. Okay? And the culture, as a matter of fact, really disapproved singleness as well. So David Instone Brewer is a biblical scholar. He's an expert on first century Jewish culture. And he wrote a wonderful little book called The Jesus Scandals, where he talks about aspects of Jesus and the apostles' lives in first century Jewish culture that we don't necessarily pick up on because our culture is not the same. So he says that Jesus' singleness would have been seen as scandalous. Because the first command given by God to humankind was be fruitful and multiply. And the way you did that as a faithful Jewish person is you got married and you had babies. And all men and women were expected to obey the command, and marriage was the way that they did it. Singleness was rare and despised in first century culture. Here's part of what Instune Brewer writes. Why was Jesus still single at the age of 30? It was clear to all who knew him. No one would let his daughter marry someone of questionable parentage, since if there was any irregularity in their birth, it could cast doubt on the legitimacy of their children for 10 generations. And Jesus' birth, as everyone knew, was irregular. Most people would have regarded the story of angels and a virgin birth as a pathetic attempt to cover up the obvious, that Jesus was conceived illegitimately out of wedlock. No good Jewish father would ever let his daughter marry. That would have been the assumption that people had about that. And as you're reading through the Gospels, there's sometimes when people reference Jesus as the son of Mary. Well, we don't pick up on that. But in that culture, that's a slap in the face. Because people are always referred to as the son of their father in that culture. And by calling him the son of Mary, they're like, you don't even know who your daddy is. And that's like a really big deal in Jewish culture. And so Jesus bore that shame throughout his entire adult life. People would look at Jesus and judge him as the bastard child of Mary, see him positioning himself as a rabbi, and would think it was a very embarrassing thing. That's what they would think. Now, you and I don't have to face anywhere near the kind of cultural toxicity and attitudes about singleness that Jesus and this poor woman did. But we do have to deal with it some, right? Our families have expectations of us and might be disappointed if we're not married, or we're not married on the timeline that they want us to. Evangelical church culture exalts marriage. For crying out loud, we go to family church, right? My first conversation when I was coming here is like, hey, I'm single, do I belong here? And Pastor Steve Wright at the time gave me the exact answer. He's like, no, this church will be your family. That's what it means. Amen. Okay. So evangelical culture does exalt marriage and family, right? And I think, honestly, it's right to do so. But if you get divorced or you never get married, it's easy to feel like you're on the outside of that. Southern culture strongly values marriage and family. Hispanic culture strongly values marriage and family. Okay? So if you never got married or your marriage failed, it's easy to feel like you're outside. On the other hand, secular American culture values sex. So singleness isn't necessarily a problem because they expect everybody to be sexually active whether you're married or not. But if you're a faithful Christian who believes that sex is for marriage and you're trying to honor that in your singleness, then your non-Christian friends or family members are going to wonder what's wrong with you. Right? Some single Christians aren't doing so great in the not having sex department. Right? Some of them are not having sex a lot. Sometimes they're not having sex just occasionally, and so they sleep around a little bit anyway, and then they kind of justify it, and they start to feel bad about it, and so there's some shame associated with that. Some Christians are single because they're gay, and they don't want to get married. And so whether they're sexually active or not, that can also be a source of shame. And in addition to all of that, 6 days ago, in the Washington Post, I read this interesting little statistic. Another source of shame about singleness is that you have this feeling that everybody else is all coupled up and happy and all Instagram perfect, and it's just you. Well, guess what? Washington Post. The title of the article is, "It's Not Just You." 51% of people 18 to 34 have no romantic partner. No wife, no fiance, no girlfriend or boyfriend. 51%. In 2004, that statistic was 33%. So there's a big shift happening in our culture. Here's another one. Family church downtown. half of the adults are single. You're talking probably 700, 800 people. Now, why aren't they here at the single adult teaching night? I'll tell you why. Some of them don't like thinking of themselves as single adults, and so they won't come to an event like that because of it. So you guys feel that a little bit with me? I know it's uncomfortable to talk about. Why is he talking about this? Okay. All right. So the good news is wherever you find yourself on this map, look, Jesus knows how it is. All those things that the married friends in your life don't get, Jesus himself gets. And I don't know if this is a comfort to you or not, but it helps me to know that God knows what it's like. He really, really, really does. And he's not indifferent to the challenge that it involves. Okay, so that's my first point. First of 4 points is Jesus knows what it's like. All right. So Jesus sees this woman coming all by herself out for noon, and he's got a strategy in mind. So let's read verse 7. Jesus says to her, here's his master strategy. Can I have a drink? Right. Now to us, that doesn't seem like a big deal. In that culture, it was a big deal. Jesus broke like several social rules by asking her for a drink. Okay? The woman should have felt safe going to the well, even with Jesus there, because there were these social taboos that should have kept him from speaking to her. Number one, adult men did not speak to women without their husbands or male relative present. He just didn't do it. Number two, Jews did not speak to Samaritans. And number three, rabbis did not speak to people with sort of shady relational status. Okay? And so for those reasons, Jesus should not have spoken to her. He doesn't care. He's like, can I have a drink? As a matter of fact, Jewish rabbis wouldn't even touch a cup that had been held by a Samaritan for fear of being unclean. And here he's asking her to, draw up some water and give me a drink. And so that's why she objected. How can you ask me for a drink? How can you, a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink? He just wades right into the conversation. Here's why I think he does it. Jesus knows that shame can only thrive in isolation. And he wants to get this woman out of her isolation chamber, into conversation, and into relationship. In the book of Hebrews, we get a glimpse of how Jesus handled shame himself. So the verse is, for the joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross, despising or scorning its shame, and now is sat down at the right hand of God the Father. Okay? And so there are sort of three elements of that. Jesus facing the shame of the cross. And by the way, the cross was an execution method designed not only to deprive you of your life, but also of your dignity. Right? It was designed to humiliate you as you were being killed. So the way that he dealt with that is he focused on the possibility of joy and not fear of judgment. He had contempt for the feelings of shame that would have kept him stuck or isolated or alone or afraid of it. Right? So the whole idea of scorning shame means you just wade right into it. And that's what he does here with the woman. And he waded into those situations that would be feared, and he just kept moving through them. Okay? So here's my second point: is that Jesus calls us out of isolation that we would impose on ourselves. So this woman, she's kind of living in this isolated bubble. She needs community. She needs to be known, and so do we. And sometimes, in our need to be known, it means that we'll have to face some fear or some awkwardness or some embarrassment in order to press into that. Now, I've been talking about this whole shame thing. Not everybody feels this strong sense of shame about being single. Maybe you just had a little twinge of embarrassment, and what are you like? Well, I'm fine. There's no problem here. Or maybe for you personally, it is a little more heavy, right? So even if you're not avoiding all human contact like this poor woman, it still takes work to find friends and to be in community. Do you find that? I find that the older I get, right now, some of you are young, you're still in that sort of college zone, and not all of your friends have married off, and you're, playing Xbox, and, that is you have more career responsibilities as you grow and develop in that. And so you come home tired, and then you're older, so you feel tireder than you would if you were like still a young whippersnapper or whatever, right? And then I think I've had some friends, they get divorced, and they've gone from having this really stable social constellation in their life, and that's been all thrown out the window. So then they have to start from zero. It's like, what am I going to do with my time? And who do I go to the movies with? And what's life going to be like when I come home after work? And there's this whole reset that you have to do, and it's just not easy, man. And a lot of times you have to do that while you're balancing kids and shared custody, and it can be a mess. And in our culture now, it's so easy to just stay at home on the couch and binge Netflix and not have meaningful interaction with other human beings. Okay? Now, I think women connect relationally more naturally than men do. Right? Men are tend to be social retards, right? We don't know what to do. Anyway, so it's easy to isolate yourself compared to the effort of reaching out, setting up meeting with friends, getting to know new people, trying new activities, embracing the adventure of life. Some of you are really good at that kind of stuff, and you're all extroverted and wade right into it. I think others are going to struggle a little bit more. Okay? Finding the kind of community that we need in order to flourish really takes work. And the thing I'm encouraged by is Jesus is so committed to it for this woman, he just wades in and breaks all these social barriers because he's trying to chip away at the ice on the surface of the frozen pond of her life. So, the conversation continues, and there's a ton of detail that we have to skip in this because he takes it deeper, talking about water, and they're thirsting again. She gets really interested in that. Okay? So then she starts to engage, and Jesus finally, he does this late, but he does the socially appropriate thing. He says, go call your husband and come back, because I'm not allowed to talk to you without him present. Right? That was the rule. That's why he told her to do that. That wasn't some random thing. Right? So, now that you want to talk about this, you better go get your husband and come back. And then she's like, I don't have one. And then he says, I know you've had 5, and the man that you're living with right now is not your husband. What you said is quite true. So what he does is he's peeling back the Band-Aid from that wound in her life. But I want you to notice that it's truth without judgment. He exposes it, but he doesn't rebuke it. He doesn't evaluate it. He just opens it up. Okay? And she probably feels very vulnerable at this point because she's gone to such great lengths to avoid having this truth about her exposed to this kind of scrutiny. But Jesus is gentle with her. Okay? So then her next move is to say, okay, well, if you know this about me, you must be a prophet, so let me ask you this religious question. Some commentators think that she's sort of dodging the issue because she's uncomfortable, so she's throwing up a religious question to avoid talking about it. I have a pastor friend, Travis, who disagrees. He said, why do you go to the temple? You go to the temple to find forgiveness for your sins. And he thinks that she's asking Jesus, where do I go to get forgiveness for all the stuff that I've done wrong? He thinks that she's positively and nobly motivated there. So then Jesus talks about true worship doesn't depend on where you go. And then she says, I know the Messiah is going to explain all this. And then Jesus does the most remarkable thing. He does this almost nowhere else in all other Gospels. He just comes out and tells her, no, I am the Messiah. I do speak to you in me. It is the most blatant revelation of his identity. Okay? Every other place in the Gospels, you have this thing that New Testament scholars call the Messianic secret, where Jesus is like, no, don't tell anybody, and go show yourself to the priest, but keep your mouth shut, blah, 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 and people go and blab anyway, right? But the reason he had to do that was, being the Messiah was a politically charged, you could get in trouble. It's like walking onto a campus with a Trump banner or something. You're headed for a world of hurt, man, if you go flying that thing around. So the point is, Jesus is being vulnerable with her. Right? He's letting her know something about himself that puts himself in a place of vulnerability, of real vulnerability. I lost one on that one. So this is the kind of community that we need. We need the kind of community where we can tell the truth about ourselves and be vulnerable without And like, if you have this embarrassment or shame at work in your heart, boy, that's going to resist you getting into that. Okay. Now, we find this kind of community first and foremost in Jesus, who knows us completely, knows everything about us, knows everything we've done right or wrong, and has still given his life and died on the cross to bring us to himself and to welcome us into community. Right? So this is my third point, is that Jesus points us to himself. He wants a relationship with us. In all his interaction with this woman, he shows her that he knows her, but he's not judging her in that sense of casting out. He's welcoming her in, and he wants her to know him. And when we come to Jesus in this way, we, like the woman, we can find forgiveness for everything that we've done wrong. We can find in him complete understanding of our situation and acceptance without judgment. Come to know who he is, he knows us. Now, I'm not sure, probably a lot of you in the room are Christians. Some of you may be kind of figuring this out. Maybe you're new to church. But you should know that Jesus wants, right? The Christian faith is not just about a bunch of religious duties. It's about coming to know the person of God in Christ in that kind of personal and connected way. I have a friend who's recently gone through a lot of personal turmoil in the last year or so, related to his family and his kids and all this kind of thing. And he said something to me that was really profound. I actually pinned it to the top of my Twitter profile. I liked it so much. We were coming back from having dinner, and he was dropping me off. He's like, I have tried vacations. I've tried hanging out with positive people. I've tried several types of therapy. I've tried medications. He says, the only thing that's made any difference for me in this whole mess that I've been through? Jesus. Just Jesus. All right. Here's the final movement. Final movement, I think, is the surprising part. So this woman comes, has this encounter with Jesus. They're vulnerable with each other. And then what does she do? The disciples come back, verse 27. See, he's talking to the woman. He's not allowed to do that, but I don't say anything because he's Jesus. So, verse 28. The woman left her water jar and went away into the town and said to the people, "Come see a man who told me all that I ever did." That is astounding. Okay, now see what she did. Why did she come out to the well in the first place? To get water. She leaves her water jar, which tells me she is abandoning the mission that she originally came out there for. And she's picked up something new. And what does she do? She goes right back to the town, and who's she talking to? She's talking to all those people that she was hiding from. And what is she talking to them about? She's talking to them about Jesus. Here's this man who knows everything that I've ever did. Right? And parenthetically, and didn't throw me under the bus about it. It's kind of a subtext. It's not in the Bible, but I kind of see that in there. All those people, and I think part of what happened was her being accepted by Jesus. It might have been her first positive interaction with a man in a long time. It seemed to take the sting out of that sense of shame. It's like she didn't even care anymore. She went right back into a relationship with those people with this testimony about Jesus. And what did they do? They got interested. Because they knew everything about that woman. They were the ones who were giving her the bad looks the whole time. And they're like, really? Okay, so then they get interested, and then they investigate. And at the end, they say, "Look, woman, it's not just because of what you said, but now we've seen this guy for ourselves. We believe this guy is the Savior of the world." Samaritans saying this about a Jewish rabbi claiming to be the Messiah. All right. So in the same way that her shame was relationally imposed, it was relationally removed. And it didn't take for her every snide person in her village getting on board with it. She just had that one interaction with Jesus. Right? Relieved of her reproach. And she goes back on this new mission to share about about Jesus. The story she had been telling herself about her life was probably this. Things started out great, and then life threw me some curveballs, and I made some mistakes, but now I'm washed up. I don't have any more hope, and I have to hide for the rest of my days. That's the narrative she was living at. But now she has this new story to tell. This man named Jesus came along and invaded my isolation, forgave my sin, healed my brokenness, and gave me a new purpose, a new mission to live. And this is the point that I think is the closest to the true heart of this text, because in part of the part that we skipped, that we didn't read, Jesus, lift up your eyes, look at the fields, they're white in harvest. Right? And so, him reclaiming this woman from lostness and sending her on mission. She would normally have been overlooked by anybody who was trying to do anything. But Jesus doesn't overlook her. He sees the power in her and the value in her, and he calls it out of her. Okay, so my last point is that Jesus sends us on mission. Now, according to Paul in 1 Corinthians 7, the great advantage of being single is the opportunity to have a single-minded focus on the kingdom of God and on pleasing the Lord. Okay? Single people have a freedom of time, money, and energy that people in family life don't have. Right? Even if you're a single parent, you still have room in your relationship constellation that other people don't have. I think about this with Jimmy Scroggins all the time. Jimmy is an amazing leader, great man. Scholars who study this say that every person can basically have about 12 significant relationships in their life. Well, Jimmy's got 11 kids and one wife. He's done. He's done. He does not have the capacity to do interpersonal ministry in the way that single people. And it's the same for all married people. All right. Let me land this plane, and then maybe we can talk and have a little interaction. Let me summarize. So Jesus knows how it is. He knows the feelings of ostracism that we can run into as single people. The second thing is he wants us to come out of isolation and into community. And I know that takes work. And he worked at it for this woman. The third thing is that Jesus points us to himself. For forgiveness for our sin, for healing for our brokenness. And the fourth thing is that Jesus sends us out on mission. Now, not to make too much of a point of this, but there's a reason that the singles leadership team is setting up social events and service projects. The social events are there to call us out of isolation. The service projects are there to propel us out on mission. And the reason that we have teaching nights like these is so that we can get to know Jesus better, being known by him. Okay. So there's method to the madness. All right. What questions or comments or disagreements or pushback or anything? Yes, ma'am. Well, we're going to push on the mic. Awesome.
Well, actually, Pastor, what my mom always tells me about some people that have certain drives, like gay people, but they are in ministry or in the church, they are not sinners. You know, they're not equally sinning because they're not, putting those drives into action. And I think that those people should be respected. And I won't call them gay. I don't know.
I know that language is a little controversial.
Yeah. Also, in the Bible, I guess in the New Testament, Jesus talking says about pastors that have dedicated their lives to be, without family for the kingdom.
Yes.
Others because the world makes them like that.
Yes.
And others because
they choose it.
They choose it.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that they are fellow Christians, they love the Lord, they serve God with all their heart. And, I don't know why some other people say, oh, why you haven't gotten married yet, But the thing is that,
Tell my mom.
yeah, but the thing is that I really admire those people, and lives are different, especially in these times where many people think that it's no longer grace period, you know, it's like a new era.
Yes, yeah, dispensation. I had a thought while you were talking, but I can't remember what it is. That's disappointing. All right, somebody else. Yes, ma'am.
Was this the lady, is this also the Mary that, first time Jesus, what was the rest of the story of woman at the well?
Okay, so.
And was she the one that?
All right, so I don't think that the Samaritan woman at the well is the same as like any of the Marys or Mary Magdalene or other things like that, because you've got a couple of different women who like come and anoint Jesus with perfume at a couple of different places or whatever. I don't think she's an overlap with that. I'm sure there's some scholarly discussion, and if you're really interested in that, go buy a commentary and knock yourself out. So I don't really know the answer to that question. Okay.
Now, there's another thing. I was in one of the big meetings that we have in the church at the other place, and Pastor Jimmy said, not all your needs are met by you. If you have a need, you should go out and look for that thing to complete you. And he was talking about single people that wanted to have a relationship.
Yeah.
And I really admire him, and I think that's exactly what you should do. I mean, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
You know, if you have, those drives and those things, just go out, be involved in different activities, get to know people.
I remember what I was going to say the first time we were talking. And it's basically that, look, everybody's going to spend some part of their life single. Like, everybody's going to. So singleness, like, for me, I've been at it for 48 years, and it hasn't worn out on me yet. But most people are not going to do that. But everybody's going to be single some. And so the question is, how do you use what singleness you have for the sake of the kingdom, and how can God deploy your mission? How can you honor Him? Okay? Yeah, Paul.
Mark, why do you think people are staying single longer? The statistics from 2004 to now.
I think there's a lot of reasons for it. This would be a long talk that I would probably really enjoy, and you guys would really be bored with. But we're living through basically a 500-year cultural crisis. The internet and digital technology have disrupted human civilization in a way that hasn't happened since the invention of movable type with Gutenberg, and which spawned the Renaissance and the Protestant Reformation and all of the changes in human culture that happened as a result of that change of way of communication. One big question that I have is, now that people younger than me from childhood have most of their relationships mediated through technology, and we don't know what that really does to people yet. But they don't appear to have relationships as often or get married as quickly. Now, I don't know if you can solely blame it on that, but I think that's one factor because it's disrupting everything. You think of how digital technology has disrupted music and retail and currency and banking and there's just a whole list of things that are just completely different because of our different ways of communication. And so I think that's some of it. That's enough of an answer for that. Okay. Good. Yes, Sean?
I just have a comment. I love that you touched on like the fourth part, right? Because the first three parts can kind of be a little bit interpreted as like a little bit selfish. Like It's all good for me.
Yeah.
That fourth part,
Yeah.
where we're calling on mission, I think that's the good stuff right there, right? It showed out her experience, however negative it was, can be used to help somebody else, and that's exactly what she did, and that's all she had. She only had that moment. She had her relationship with God, her relationship with Christ at that moment, and then she had her experience. That's all the tools she had, but he used her in that moment. And I think that's a sticking point right there, is that she was used to help others.
That's right. And this theme occurs all throughout the Bible, and I think is the heart of the gospel too, right? Because the gospel is good news for us. It's like, yeah, forgiveness of sins, Jesus paid it all, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so the other side is, oh yeah, by the way, you're an ambassador. You have a new identity. You're on mission. You're part of the army of the Lord now. And that's bundled in with it. Now, I know that the way that we talk about the gospel in church has been like, oh no, just ask Jesus into your heart and come to church some, and it's all good. It's like, well, come on, those things are connected, man, right? Jesus comes to her and finds her and heals her in that brokenness, not just for her sake, for the sake of her whole village, right? And for the sake of propelling her on that mission and that meeting. And then if the whole shame stuff isn't really connecting with you, man, dig into the mission thing, man. Why do you think God has you in the status of life that you're in now? Right? Okay, well, I'm sure there's a complicated answer to that. But part of it is you have a level of availability to Him to be used by Him for His kingdom. And I think you are pressing to it. I think. Yes, ma'am.
I know you said this was your first time speaking on singleness. How come you spoke it the first time, being that the statistics of half of people in Family Church just downtown is single?
Well, nobody ever asked me to talk about it. As a matter of fact, they didn't even ask me to talk on singleness. They're like, hey, we're doing a single teaching, and I thought, I know what I'm going to talk about. I'm tired of listening to single people talk about, I'm tired of listening to married people talk about singleness. Sick and tired of married people talking about singleness. You don't even know. I'm going to talk about it. Sorry. There might be a little sinful resentment in that statement. But I know you feel me.
Okay, second question, and I'm done. How have you maintained your contentment?
That is a good question. One thing I have been asked about, people ask me, because I'm lifelong single, never married, and I appear to be happy. They're like, oh, are you called to be single? You have the gift of singleness, like it's a halo that magically descends from on high. Right? I think the real truth is there are human sides to it and spiritual sides to it. And I think the spiritual sides are more human than we think that they are. Okay? So like in my case, I was an introverted kid, bookish, always content to kind of be on my own. In all of the ways that I thought about my life, like getting married and having a family was never an important feature of the dreams I had for myself, even when I was a little kid. I have no idea why that's the case, because I come from a family full of healthy marriages and big families and all that kind of thing. I don't know why I was that way. Okay? So add to that I was like sort of nerdy and socially awkward and a very late bloomer on a lot of things, socially speaking. Right? So then I got into a work environment where I went to a church where the demographic we served didn't really have a lot of eligible people my age, and I was kind of a workaholic anyway, and so I just kind of kept my nose to the grindstone, whatever. I had a few dating relationships along the way. They didn't work out for several different reasons, and then I was like, well, it sounds like a lot of work to me, and I'm doing great, so I've kind of lived it out. So like, there's no grand story. There's no grand, well, I was reading my Bible one day, and blah, blah, blah. It's just been the way that I have experienced the grace of God as my life has been. Now, I don't think I'm normal. Like, I don't know any other single pastors. Like, I'm like a goose in a room full of ducks or something,
question for you.
Yeah.
In 2015, I came out of a relationship, and everyone said, listen, even though you're out of it, you're not healed because you have a soul tie. Yet, I've been reading the Bible for years. I can't seem to find that anywhere. Is there another term for that? Where is that found? Is there some truth to that?
Okay. I'm not familiar with that language. I think that you could probably make a case for something like that in like the way the Bible describes marriage. It says, it says that the two shall become one flesh. And I think, like, if you have a serious, intimate relationship with someone else, like there's a bonding that takes place between you that's physical and is emotional and social and intellectual. It's sort of a complete thing. It's not just a physical thing. But I don't think that necessarily means that, like, if your relationship has ended, the other person's moved on, that there are like these invisible, like, tow ropes wrapped around you to, like, so I don't know what that means. I didn't really study up on everything that Paul has to say about, like divorce and remarriage and all that kind of thing. The Bible's ideal for marriage relationships is one man and one woman for a lifetime. But there are lots of reasons that the ideal doesn't happen. Some of them are because of sin. Some of them are because of disregard of God's design. Some of them are just because of things that happen. So I don't know. I would give yourself a little grace, maybe, and without knowing the particulars of your situation. I'll kind of leave it there.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious because I never ran into it.
Yeah, I don't know about soul tie business. I've been reading the Bible for 30 years, and I'm pretty sure I've not read that language. So.
I just wanted to comment that I found your point about societal and familial pressures very poignant.
They're out there, man.
Yeah.
Well, and this is the piece of the shame thing, right? Like my buddy who's in his late 20s, like he's just kind of going along, and then he turns around and all of his friends are married, and he feels like he didn't realize everybody else was playing musical chairs and he's the last one left standing, right? And as a matter of fact, in the book I've been reading on shame, it talks about how there's this shearing effect of shame sometimes, where you're doing something that you enjoy and you're not thinking about it, and it doesn't even occur to you that it's shameful, and then you kind of look around and you become socially aware, and everybody's like sort of glaring at you, and then all of a sudden you become self-conscious. And I think about my friend I was talking to him a couple months ago, and he was dealing with that, with this just sense of awareness of like, oh, my friends are married now. I thought I'd be married too, and he's got that sense of that. It's good. Yes, sir.
My mind goes a lot of different places, and
Here comes the mic. Here comes the mic. Okay.
The Paul thing, he preaches that it's better to be single. And
I almost pulled that text. Wouldn't this be self-gratifying for a room full of us? Because I really wanted to. Someday I'm going to get the chance to get in front of a church with lots of married people, and it's like, look, y'all. I mean, it's fine for y'all to be married, but Jesus says it's better to be single. Matthew 19. Paul says it's better to be single. So y'all kind of missed the boat on that. That's okay. It's okay. Paul said you can be married. It's fine. It's fine. But singleness is like that much better than being married. It's just that much better. And I think that's an honest reading of that text. Whereas evangelical culture says, oh, here's marriage. And it's like, oh, well, I know that there are some people who have the magic gift of singleness, but we've never been able to find one. And, and so therefore, young man, you better just go get yourself married right now. Come on. eHarmony. Tender if you're desperate. FarmersOnly.com. Then testimony can get out there, boy. Get yourself right. Anyway, I interrupted, you were making a point.
It's fine. You probably say better than I'm going to do. Anyway, now Paul was preaching singleness. Now, we know Jesus' history kind of up to that point. He didn't really dabble into the love dating scene.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, it was Paul running from a bad relationship when he decided to join the ministry rather than just keep going or
A lot of people think, because we believe that Paul was a member of the Sanhedrin, and so some people think that Paul had been married before, and it was a situation where maybe his wife left. We don't have any textual evidence for that. That's just an opinion by some scholars. As far as we know, for sure, Paul was never married, and in his instructions to it, so he and Jesus both do basically the same thing, right? In that culture, marriage is here and singleness is like underneath the floor, right? And so what they do in their teaching is they raise it up to be about at the same level, or slightly, just slightly better, because that's what they say. That's what they say. Jesus says, when he's talking about that whole eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven passage, after they talk about marriage and after they talk about divorce in Matthew 19, the disciples say, if the situation with marriage is like this, it's better not to get married. And Jesus is like, not everybody can accept it. But those who can should. And I bet you've never heard that preached in the church. Jesus said it, man. It's in there. Anyway, so someday I'll preach these stuff. But, yes, sir.
You said shame thrives in isolation.
Yes.
And I thought that was beautiful. Personally, like in times of shame, I feel like the enemy's quick to tell me I'm alone and feeling that.
That's right.
But ironic enough, the Lord provides either others that are going through that same experience, or someone who's gone through it and has overcome it. So that was a great comment.
Thank you, Miguel. And listen, part of what I want to do with this is I want you to feel like, right? Some of you are fine with this. You're not struggling with this. But I think some of you are. And just to know that Jesus understands it and knows how to deal with it, and that you're in a room with other people right now who kind of get the whole dealing with the social pressure of it. So, like, press into community, guys. Let's be friends, man. We need it. Yes, ma'am.
I really appreciate what you said, because I never looked at Jesus as being a single man.
That's right.
Until you just said that, and how that they opened up to each other, and with them getting themselves out instead of watching Netflix or whatever.
Right.
Actually, it is worth getting that. I believe that they're strong for the reason everything that happens is he created us. If you're older, one of them, it's always the single person is a caregiver for the parents.
Right.
Because there are damages to that couple, but there also there is a time and place and a need for every situation. Just to try and feel and love with people that they are. Sometimes people that are single and that they can put out in the place with just as a single parent. And then children actually really need them to be there. They're full of attention to do that. The young one is, I just look at people in their 20s and 30s and when the world is around there.
Yeah.
And now that they need to be out there, we need to contact, we need to get out there and be interested in curiosity people and find out what interests you have and help you someone.
And the point is, there's a lot of opportunity. Okay, so 2 points that you made. One is that God's sovereign over the thing. He knows what it is, and He's got a purpose in it. The other thing is, there's a ton of opportunity. Like, go live an interesting life. Right? All right. Is that enough?
Any more comment? Unless there's someone else too. I don't want to. This is a phenomenal discussion. I don't want to.
Happy to continue the discussion over bagged up cookies and Cheez-Its and refreshments in the back afterward. Listen, thank you for your patient attention to kind of an awkward topic. It was a risk to do it, but you guys hung in there with me, and I appreciate it very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Our one little unicorn.